Welcome to I Drink, Therefore I Am, a think tank media podcast hosted by international spirits educator and whiskey ambassador Martin C. Duffy. Each episode, Marty sits down with distillers, brand builders, and industry insiders to talk about the craft, the culture, and the business behind the spirits world. Pour yourself something appropriate, and let's get into it.
Hi, everyone. Martin Duffy here, Crystal King of Chicago, and you are watching I Drink, Therefore I Am podcast about the drink industry in general. Covered a number of different things. For some reason, my head is enormous, but it looks even more enormous. There we go. That's a little better. Today we have Ted Breaux. Breaux. I'm going to say it like that. Breaux. The French.
Whoa.
Breaux. Ted is the founder of Jade Spirits, Jade Liqueurs, including Absinthe. And in fact, he is a renowned expert on Absinthe, which is going to be very cool because we want to get into the history of the rise, fall, and the rise again of Absinthe. Also, Ted, you've worked with Dale DeGroff on his spirits, his bitters, especially, right? So let's get right into this because I am very eager. As I was telling you off camera, I used to work for Benedictine, another French liqueur. And during that time, I used to research quite a bit about the drink culture of the late 19th century when Benedictine became big and what was its main competitors. You know, a lot of times people think of chartreuse. Chartreuse was always, especially in the cocktail culture, chartreuse was kind of Benedictine's. It was like it's ketchup to Benedictine's mustard, something like that. Anyways, but the big one that was kind of taken out of commission was Absinthe. And I'm fascinated to find out. I know a bit of the history of it, but there must be more to it. It always seemed crazy to me that why was it so demonized?
Oh, there's more to it. There's a lot more, hours more as far as talking about it. It's amazing how deep that rabbit hole goes. And the thing is, I wondered the same. Back in the mid 90s, I was a research scientist in New Orleans, my hometown. And I was the right person in the right place at the right time. I became interested in absinthe back then. And if many people who've been in New Orleans might have noticed, there's a bar on Bourbon Street called the Old Absinthe House. It's been there since 1874.
Classic, yeah.
And yeah, so the thing is, if you're going around New Orleans and if you're doing any research in New Orleans history, the word absinthe does pop up now and then. And this was one of those situations where it was like, yeah, I bartended when I was in college and, I thought I knew a bit about liquor, but what was absinthe? What exactly was that stuff? And about the only thing that you really get was, oh yeah, it was that green liquor that made people crazy. And is it really? Okay. Well, what was in it that made people crazy? I mean, I'm a research scientist. So that's what really got me hooked in absinthe. Like I said, I was just the right person, the right place, at the right time. And being a research scientist, I was interested in researching the topic, and I was absolutely confounded that nobody really had a solid answer to so many questions that should have been answered a long time ago. So that's what got me hooked.
I mean, a lot of times you find out that at the root of some of these, it's somebody saw it as a threat to their own brand or their own category. And so they go after it and they glom on something like wormwood. I mean, that wormwood was the big, that was the thing that, oh my God, it makes you hallucinate and it leads to harder drugs or something, which makes you question every other kind of drug too, when you go, wait a minute, wormwood? Really? It was I mean, what was that? Why, who, was there any one person or one company or what was the impetus behind it? Why did people
Yeah, I mean, so if we go, the analogy I like to use is if we go to the mid 1700s in London, there was a big problem called the gin craze,
Hmm.
right? And gin was given a nickname Mother's Ruin. Okay. I mean, is gin really that bad? Well, no, it isn't. But it can be if it's improperly made. Okay. If it's something that is a cheap, adulterated imitation of gin that is marketed primarily toward poor alcoholics, yeah, it's going to create problems. And gin did in the mid 1700s. And basically, in a nutshell, what we had with absinthe is a repeat of the gin craze in a different country a century later. So now, but all of this was, this would be the ultimate revelation, and it would take time for that to unfold and become clear, as well as all the economics and the political shenanigans, and all the things that have nothing at all, everything to do with human nature and motivations, and nothing to do with the liquor itself. That all would eventually become clear. But for the time being, it's like, okay, this green liquor made people crazy because, it was this stuff in it. It was wormwood, which we know is grand wormwood or Artemisia absinthium. Absinthe is named after absinthium, grand wormwood. And of course, there were rumors and myths about this, that it was, a poisonous plant. Well, I mean, look, we go into a herb shop, I'll point out a half dozen things right away that you can hurt yourself with. But the reality is that, in a nutshell, absinthe, proper absinthe, never caused any problems except for alcoholism. But back in the day, before there were any regulations, any quality standards, any legal enforcement, there were no laws. It was all buyer beware. This was a problem, because whenever you have something that becomes popular and it costs money, I mean, one thing I emphasize is when it comes to traditional absinthe, it's not cheap to make it. Just like chartreuse isn't cheap to make, to do it properly. But whenever something becomes popular and it's devoid of regulation, there's always a drive to make cheaper versions of it. And in a nutshell, that's what happened. But of course, for the time being, I went down this rabbit hole and followed this road of fallacies that, oh yeah, it was Artemisia absinthium, it's poisonous and it's hallucinogenic, and people were walking around tripping, and it was, causing, the population to have hallucinations. It's just absolute. I mean, it sounds fun, and it's something that's fun to believe, but it's completely false. It's wrong.
I always found it interesting just because they zeroed in on this one spirit, as if nobody ever drank themselves to death on cognac or whiskey,
Right.
or anything
Right.
else.
Exactly.
It's like,
Yeah.
what?
Well,
And then you pick up
absinthe,
wormwood?
yeah, it was hugely popular. And the thing is, so how do you put absinthe? How do you slam absinthe without getting any other, without getting Benedictine liqueur caught in the ruckus? It's simple. You pick out one ingredient that you find in absinthe and not much anything else, and you blame that. You declare that a poison. You blame that for all the social illnesses that you attribute to absinthe or drinking absinthe. I mean, it was just absolute rubbish. And I think it was compounded by the fact that in France, the almost all of the absinthe in Europe, or for the world, in the world for that matter, came from a very rural region along the Franco-Swiss border. I mean, that was ground zero for absinthe, and not an area that's heavily populated, not well represented in the French government. But at the time, I mean, wine is produced everywhere in France. Wine was the biggest or economic, and therefore political enemy to absinthe. So it's just, it all gets reduced down to politics and greed and economic interests that are used to contaminate science and the truths. But for a long time, I didn't know, who knew it was real. I mean, all we had to go on were commonly held beliefs that, absinthe contains some sort of deleterious or hallucinogenic property or something. And of course, that was all a myth. But it took a while to resolve that.
But that's just it. I mean, to convince. So in the U.S., you couldn't have absinthe because
Correct.
if it contained wormwood, right? So you'd have
Correct.
other things like you had Pernod. You could have that, which was kind of what absinthe light in a way. It wasn't
No,
true absinthe. No.
no, no. And that was another myth that somehow that like, anise liqueurs, like, like Pernod or, were reasonable substitutes for absinthe. And they certainly aren't. They're not made anything like it. And the only two things that they really have in common is that they taste like anise. And that was one of the things that really grabbed me, because in 1996, I had 2 bottles of vintage absinthe practically fall into my lap from 2 completely different sources. And so I had an opportunity to draw samples from those bottles to top brands of absinthe that were celebrated, and so I became a member of a very lonely club of people who had tasted antique absinthe, knew what it tasted like, and therefore realized that there was nothing like it at the time. And during the 90s in Europe, they had this resurgence of absinthe, but it was just the problem was what was being sold was absinthe was almost invariably flavored vodka with green dye, sometimes with some powdered herbs in the bottle. That was nothing at all like the original spirit. And it's that, here I am, a guy that owns it. And then by the time by the end of the 20th century, I had multiple samples of vintage absinthe. I knew what they tasted like. And the one thing I knew is I couldn't buy anything like it. And then in June of 2000, I became the first person to analyze antique absinthe using modern science to look for what it was that was wrong. And the big revelation and the big paradigm shift in my own understanding was nothing was wrong. You could take those vintage brands and sell them today. There was nothing adulterating or harmful or deleterious in it, aside from alcohol. So that is that is really when the clock began ticking on the U.S. ban. Because at the time, that's correct, there was no genuine absinthe being sold in the U.S. You couldn't, but the closest the thing to absinthe that anyone can buy is like a substitute with fake artificial color in it and sugar and no absinthe at all in it, and that was unacceptable to me, especially given my understanding. And also in the early 2000s, we had the beginnings of the craft cocktail renaissance coming about. And when we go back and look at cocktail history, absinthe plays an indelible role in classic cocktail history. So all these things began coming together, not just the understanding of absinthe, proper understanding of it, sweeping aside the mysteries and the myths and seeing how the pieces of the puzzle truly fall together. At the same time, like, you've got this little trend that would eventually become a global phenomenon, and that is the renaissance of the classic cocktail.
Yeah.
So all this was this set the stage and provided the inspiration to make the wrongs of the past right. And that's when we started turning our sights onto the United States.
That really was. I mean, it was interesting. I was a bartender back in the 90s when there wasn't a lot of resources. There weren't a lot of books. I mean, I guess there were some books, but you didn't know about them. You had no internet. I know for you youngsters out there, it's hard to believe, but the internet is relatively new. And so back then, I always bemoaned the fact that so many bartenders, including myself, when I first started, obviously, I knew nothing. I just was thrown behind a bar and told to pour stuff. And I think, oh, okay. I didn't really know what the hell I was pouring. I thought Southern Comfort was a bourbon. Yeah, because it's, I don't know, it's in the bourbon aisle. But now, when that started happening, I thought it was really great, just because bartenders and the mixologists became were doing such deep dives, to the point though where it got annoying too at the same time. I mean, bartenders no longer told you a joke anymore. They weren't really bartenders. They were these artists who don't,
Molecular mixologists.
don't interrupt me while I'm making this drink. I'll be back to you in about 15 minutes. Hold on. But at the same time, it did bring up all this information, especially on brands and categories, and the history of certain cocktails that were fascinating. Stuff that was really big, like 100 years ago. No one knew anything about it. Now, absinthe obviously did. And you know how? Did you ever see the movie, the original Moulin Rouge?
Yeah.
From the 1950s? Toulouse-Lautrec. That was his baby, a little absinthe. And that I loved that whole kind of French artist culture and how that played into it. And then the art, I always associate his art and the art of a lot of those guys at that time with a drink like absinthe, which I think gave it kind of a panache, a coolness. But I never thought it would ever come back, just because, again, I had no idea what wormwood was. And I thought, oh my God, man, wormwood, it was drilling holes into people's brains. It's horrible. And I thought it might have been an actual worm made from wood.
So much confusion, but look, I was right in the midst of all that too. And it took me time to sort all this out and figure out just what the hell was going on. But, yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a scientist, I'm interested in science, but this journey got me, I had to take so many tangents. I had to venture out into art and culture and psychology and of course, economics and politics of the 19th century. There's no spirit that has a history that is sorted as absinthe and so widely misunderstood. But absinthe was symbolic. It was symbolic. It was Delapox symbolism, of art and culture. Parisian culture, which was quite liberal and viewed by the Victorians as in England as vulgar. But yet Paris was the fashion capital of the world, and so many decadent things came out of that, not the least of which was, of course, the absinthe culture. And it's amazing how that culture, it permeated not just Europe, but it was exported around the world and definitely to the United States, which of course was the cocktail is an American phenomenon. And absinthe is it's amazing the reach that absinthe had at the time. I mean, even today on the craft cocktail bar, absinthe is a niche spirit. But by the turn of the century, by the 19th century, it was everywhere. It was East Coast, West Coast. It was everywhere. Every good bar had a bottle of absinthe on it. So yeah, I mean, it's when you get into the cocktail history of it, then it really becomes interesting. And absinthe was used. I often quote the 1930 Savoy cocktail book is the cocktail book that I would have, but what I would have if I were marooned on a desert island. And in that book, Craddock's first publishing, there are like 100 cocktails in the book that call for absinthe. So used a lot like cocktail hot sauce. But, so our view, the American view and the European view of absinthe were two different realms.
So Ted, though, nowadays I find, and I don't get this. I mean, I'm always running into folks who don't like the anise. They don't like the black licorice character of a number of different spirits, and I love it. I've always loved it. So how is that hurt? I'm assuming, obviously, if absinthe was very popular back in the late 1800s, there was that was not the case back then, but now it is. So how has that hurt the whole absinthe category?
It's played a role in several different ways. Number one, you and I, as Americans, and having grown up in the U.S., we are underexposed to the flavor of anise. We are underexposed, and where this becomes apparent is when you go to go to the UK. Anglophones, we think culturally are fairly close to us, but their exposure to anise is much greater than ours is. And then when you go to mainland Europe, and then again, I mean, everyone is very well exposed to it. But one thing that's always impressed me about Italian bartenders is how cultured their palates are. I mean, even by a fairly young age, as compared to Americans, we're just not exposed to the breadth and the depth of flavors that they are. And anise is a core component of classic Mediterranean spirits, which were basically derived from distillations of making brandy and then soaking anise and fennel, things like that, in the brandy spices and distilling it again, and which is the basis for classic spirits like arak and raki and ouzo and those things. But what you and I as Americans, what we know as licorice, which is a misnomer because licorice root is a very different botanical that doesn't taste like anise. One of the things that we Americans get wrong. But you and I, we think of like candies or, sweet anisets or sambucas or things like that, all of which are made of oil of Chinese star anise, which is not the same thing as the green anise distillation that comprises absinthe. And I'll have you know that when I began studying absinthe, when I first found out that absinthe was an anise flavored spirit, I was really disappointed because I was repulsed by the flavor of anise. Well, not anymore. So, my palate has evolved, and I love the flavor of anise done well. It's just, but it's separating those things out, from the industrialized products that, we describe as having a licorice flavor versus a proper absinthe, which is quite herbal and has a flavor of green anise and fennel. It's a very refined, very natural, not industrial type of flavor. So it's when we get enough exposure to separate these things out, then our perception changes.
Yeah, it's very true. I think here in the US, we get a dumbed down version of everything. Whereas I've been over to Eastern Europe and you go there and you taste homemade spirits. And you go, oh my God, really? And actually, we were talking before about Stephen McCarthy and Clear Creek. Most of his spirits were based on his travels. And so he always tried to replicate the spirits of whatever country it was in. His McCarthy's single malt is based off of Lagavulin in Scotland. And I just found that really cool, very fascinating. But unfortunately, especially when Stephen had his distillery, it was very small. His production was small, his outreach. The only thing that really got any kind of recognition was his McCarthy single malt, and that was because it hit just as single malt scotches, and especially peated island malts, became really big. But it's funny, all that, and to your point, once the cocktail culture came around, now you start seeing those being used more, but more in cocktails, which when I worked for Benedictine was a little thorn in my side, because I'm telling, hey, you're only using about that much Benedictine in their cocktail, trying to move it. Would be, and I don't know, you could talk to this. What you don't see is that after dinner drink much anymore. I've done trainings at high-end steakhouses, and it's completely new to them. I go, you're kidding? It's on your back bar. You have this stuff. You never present it.
Amaro. Yeah, you got these things. Sure.
I have to have an Averna after dinner. It's like liquid Drano. It just,
I like one before with a splash of soda and a squeeze of orange. I mean, when Steve McCarthy got into this, I mean, think about that. He was emulating the European tradition of distilling fruit and making fruit eau de vie, which is something that, when you go to Europe, and especially places like in France and Austria and, Italy, of course, that's a thing. and not in the States. And they had all this fruit in the West Coast and nothing to do with it. So, but for Steve, you think about this as a niche and a passion project, and during the era of the disco drink, when no one, when you're drinking Alabama Slammers, nobody cares about State Eau de Vie. But again, the whole cocktail renaissance helped change that. And another phenomenon that's happened since the beginning of the craft cocktail renaissance, and something that was something that definitely played a role, was it's 20 some odd years ago when I fell into the spirits industry because of absinthe. It was all vodka and flavored vodka, remember?
Yeah.
And so something, yeah. So it was great that there was a lot of interest in absinthe, but we were releasing, reintroducing absinthe into the U.S. market during an era that was there was like cotton candy flavored vodka, remember?
Oh my God.
So
birthday cake vodka.
Right. Bubblegum flavored, all this stuff. So the thing is, vodka, the basis of vodka is alcohol and water. And absinthe was a very strong flavored spirit. But fortunately, one of the trends that has happened since that we're in now is now that agave spirits have eclipsed vodka in volume, there's definitely been a trend and a movement back toward strong flavored spirits, which is great and really important to us as Americans, because for us to develop that is what really develops palates. And one of the nice things when I see like people in their 20s who are acclimated to like these smoky, mineral heavy mezcals and things like that. Well, if you can handle that, then something like like McCarthy's peated American single malt is not a big stretch, nor is absinthe, nor are liqueurs like chartreuse and Benedictine more strongly flavored spirits. So that has, fortunately, that trend has opened up the palette of colors that are available to us and that people will accept. So that is an important trend that has happened recently.
Well, also too with absinthe, again, I think of those movies where the French artists are all sipping it, and you got the little cordial glass, and I love the fact that you can get so much flavor and so much impact from just a sip and just sipping it, and moderation. And here you don't need to, so, well, you lived in New Orleans, you walk down Bourbon Street and they have those giant hurricane glasses. It's
right.
Like, you don't need all that. In fact, it's mostly sugar.
Hurricanes, hand grenades, huge ass beers. Yeah, they're all there.
Hand grenades. I'm never going to drink a hand grenade. I just can't. I can't bring myself to drink a hand grenade. I like that. I think it brings back a bit more of the class. That era where adults went to a bar or a restaurant and you ordered this really nice, and you can have it along with a coffee. I don't know if absinthe and coffee, does that go?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Oh yeah, they do. Mm-hmm.
Here's something you can explain to me. The whole, and I don't know if this was truly a absinthe thing or this more of a Pernod thing. The whole water tower with the sugar cube.
Okay. Well, look, yeah, that's very much absinthe. That's very much 19th century. Those began appearing kind of late in 19th century, maybe 1880s when the absinthe fountains. But when, absinthe had its own, here's one of the most enthralling things about the history of absinthe is that it's not like gin. Absinthe had its own glassware that was used only for serving absinthe. It had its own accoutrement. It had absinthe fountains, carafes that were branded, that were, that held ice water. It had all these match strikers that were branded, all these items that are collectible. And that's part of the nice thing about those items in classic, antique absinthe glasses and fountains, things like that, is they are as close as you can get. They give you something to hold on to. They're tangible. You have evidence that all these things happen. And yes, absinthe was a very fashionable drink and very trendy, and it was for years, which is why these things exist. And so because it was fashionable and classy and trendy, I mean, that's part of the appeal of it. Absinthe it's more than just a spirit. It's it's got a human face. There's a lot of humanity. It's the human, I say it's the human condition in a bottle. It really is. And so for me as a scientist, I mean, that's why, it was elements of the story beyond the science that appealed to me and really had me enthralled. And that's why, 30 years plus years later, I still talk about it. And it is, absinthe is, in New Orleans, it was a little bit, in the US, it was a little bit different. In New Orleans, of course, absinthe was the basis of various drinks, and it was really popular. But it was a bit different in the US. US was more cocktail oriented. So we didn't have quite the cafe scenes with the absinthe fountains. And yes, I have an antique absinthe fountain that's about turn of the century. It never leaves the house. Not many of those survive because they were always operated by patrons, which is another part of the appeal. Because when you ordered an absinthe in a bistro in Paris in the 1890s, you got a glass with a shot in it. Finishing the drink the way you wanted it was totally up to you. It was always done by the patrons. And that's another element of it, because it's the hands-on aspect of it that kept it trendy and fashionable. So there are many, many facets to it. And when you can start seeing all these facets of the story, it's a fascinating picture.
Well, I was going to say, it'd be very cool to see, maybe at some of these spirit shows, to do, I'm assuming you've been part of documentaries on this, like on the History Channel
definitely.
or something like that.
Oh, yes.
That'd be great to see a video on that. I think a lot of, I don't know about you, but I've seen less interest. It seemed like the whole, the cocktail culture really peaked maybe about 10 years ago. COVID obviously didn't help things any, but it seems like there's a lot of the guys who are really geeky into everything, and either tiki drinks or into gin. There was a gin bars and all this other stuff, and they're trying to get into the culture of it. It seems to have pulled back, and even a lot of the liqueurs that had kind of a heyday for a while, and 15 years ago, you don't hear about them as much. So what do you do now to drive that interest, to get people back into especially trying something like absinthe, which I don't know if there's some folks who might still have that weird notion about absinthe from 100 years ago, but also who probably have no idea, never heard of it.
Yeah.
So what is it that you could do there, Ted?
Well, what I'm noticing is 20 years ago, when we launched Lucid, Lucid got approved. Lucid was the first genuine absinthe to be sold in the U.S. between 1912 and 2007. So when Lucid was approved on March 5th, 2007, which was the effective ending of the ban, that the market that we went into at the time was quite different. As you know, that's when the classic cocktail renaissance was really gaining momentum. Okay. And so we were there for that. And of course, people were fascinated with absinthe because of what it was. And people at that time had many, many misconceptions about it, because that's really all there was that was available. There just wasn't a lot of internet resources and a lot of credible information out there. And so for us, it was very much an uphill climb. Now, 20 years later, now we're dealing with a different generation, a new generation, which is distinctly different from what the people that I was interfacing with 20 years ago. The newer generation is not quite so pre-programmed with myths, so that's a good thing. And like I said earlier, their palates tend to be a little bit. They tend to be a little more open-minded. Their palates a little bit more developed. But like you say, it seems that the craft cocktail renaissance peaked before COVID. And since then, yes, I think COVID definitely had a lot to do with that, as well as, the economic uncertainties and, of course, macro market trends that we just can't control and are out there. But the one thing that the craft cocktail renaissance has done is returned quality back to the bar and has raised a level of expectations with respect to quality, and has certainly, I feel, made inroads and improved the status of the bartender. And hopefully we will not retreat from what was being, what that has accomplished. Because prior to that, you remember, it was, juice guns and just, stuff that wasn't, looking back now, just really so many things that just weren't even worth drinking. But yeah, I mean, it may be that the market volume may contract a little bit, but hopefully the quality will not. So it's certainly no secret that the average quality of a cocktail that one gets in bars and restaurants has certainly improved over the past 20 years. And anytime you're going to have classic cocktails or riffs on classics, or modern takes on classics, and they use quality ingredients, we feel it's important that Absinthe remains an arrow in the quiver of the skilled bartender.
Well, have you seen, I go to a number of spirit events, usually whiskey ones. And I've been to two big ones, one in Kentucky and one in Ohio just this month, where whiskey distilleries are making absinthe. Now, however, what's kind of funny is I like I said, I do love absinthe. I want to taste it. Unfortunately, I have to make sure I don't taste absinthe first. And everything will have a little essence of absinthe to it. Have you tried any of these other locally made absinthes that some of these smaller distilleries are producing? And
Sure.
I don't ask them. I'm assuming they're using wormwood and they're trying to be as authentic as possible, but they're not a research scientist like you are, so they're not. It could be questionable to what degree they're going.
The way I look at it is like this. When I got into this years ago, again, I was disappointed that I owned classic absinthe from the late 19th century, and I couldn't buy anything like it. And that inspired me to go and do what I did, which was find a distillery in France. And fortunately, with the help of a friend of mine living in Paris, I was able to do that, find a distillery from that still had original absinthe distilling equipment from the 1880s. And I was able to source original ingredients from their original regions where the best were sourced. I mean, my mission was to replicate exactly what had been missing from the market for so long. When you look at classic cocktails that call for absinthe, my mission was to be able to sell you an absinthe that is exactly like the one that those cocktails, or the absinthe that those cocktails were developed around. And that's it. Now, that established, the purpose of this was to establish, this is what absinthe was. This is what it was. Now, it's just like gin. Gin is a very broad category. And It would be a different world if every gin was a traditional London, dry gin. But just like here in the U.S., you have many distillers of gin. Are these traditional gins? No. Do they pretend to be? No. Are they good for the gin category? Yes, because they add color to the category. They add some variation. And my rule is simple. People ask me, well, absinthe is legal in the States, so why don't you distill your absinthe in the States? I can't. The materials I need are not available here. Okay. Yes, I can go to a herb supplier and I can technically buy those same materials, just like you can go to a supermarket and you can buy table grapes, but you cannot go to a supermarket and buy Merlot cultivated in Saint-Emilion, right? You can't. So that's the rabbit hole that I'm in. But I like it when, the first American distilled absinthe in the market was St. George. And I know Lance, and I think he did a fine job with it. And I like the way that it expands the category of absinthe, because just like gin is not strictly a one-trick pony, other than all proper gins are just still, using juniper. The same could be said for absinthe. And it's nice that you have some variability in it, so it's not all just one thing. But, my mission was to recreate the cornerstone that had been missing for the better part of a century. So I'm happy that they distill an absinthe. And as long as it's distilled properly and I can recognize it as absinthe when I taste it, I'm fine with it.
Now, you don't live in New Orleans at the moment, but you used to. Born and raised. There is the Absinthe House right there. Is that on Bourbon Street?
Yes, it's on Bourbon Street. Mm-hmm. The old Absinthe House.
Will you be down at Tales of the Cocktail this year?
Normally, if I get to Tales, it's a last minute decision. Last year I was there and had a great tasting setup with absinthe and DeGrasse spirits and Clear Creek and all the things that we've been talking about. It just kind of depends. I was at Tales every year from the first or second year until like COVID. I was there. I participated every year. It's just that Tales, when Tales got started, it was great because it was a little convention of the cocktail nerds from around the country and outside of the country. So it was great to be able to meet the people that you read about and who published books. And Tales evolved and it got bigger and it became something a bit different. But I do still occasionally, I may not be there every year, but I still occasionally get to Tales and sometimes I'd really not plan on going, but something comes up and I end up being there. So who knows?
I would just think, a class on absinthe in the back of the Absinthe House. They have that bar in back. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, all seems like
I've given classes on absinthe at various points during Tales, and it's been a while. So yeah, I would say definitely due for a new one. And of course, I would love to do that. It's always up to the powers that be, and so it's one of those things that's really kind of out of my hands. But
well,
yeah, there's always room for an absinthe class when it comes to bartenders, and it doesn't matter where in the world you are. I mean, it's a spirit that needs to be sold with an owner's manual, right? Because
right. Well, I know, but even if you can give the basics and kind of give this kind of information, we have a limited amount of time, but I was just thinking, my friend Dave Schmier does his Indie Spirit Expo at Tales, but he also does a bigger one here in Chicago. And there's usually a room off to the side that you could do a whole seminar on it, like an afternoon seminar.
I would love to. I'm all about side rooms.
And I don't think I don't think you'd have to put much cheddar cheese into it. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, it's pretty well trodden ground. The thing about absinthe is I tell people that my life is about 15% distillation and 85% education, because that's really the most of what I do. And the absinthe education that I do, it's non-branded. It's really just it's about truth and accuracy. And even though that the amount of misinformation that had permeated, that was the real problem 20 years ago. I mean, it's greatly diminished, but there's still some out there. There's still some, unfortunately, some false stuff that's being promoted out there. So it keeps people like me on our toes, and it's truth and education about the spirit is really what it needs, and it's the best thing. It lifts all the boats and all the responsible players and all the good people. So that's really the focus of what I do in the realm of Absinthe. 30 years after this whole thing got started.
Do you have videos on YouTube about Absinthe?
There are plenty with me in it. I haven't done my own series on it, which would be
what the
yeah, I know that would be the thing about it is if I do that, when I do anything, I do it like 110%, and that's the trick. I would want it to be. I haven't done my own. I've done it for a lot of other people. I've done lots of press and media. In fact, I think the first media exposure I had in the realm of Absinthe was New York Times, like back in 2000. I've done lots of television in various parts of the world, actually. But yeah, I guess I could do maybe like a series, but it would certainly be a full-time effort, knowing the way that I would want to do it.
I think it'd be very cool. And it's kind of sad. I guess the History Channel doesn't really cover history anymore.
Well, not unless it's Ancient Aliens, but I am in an episode of I am in an episode of Modern Marvels. So I've done History Channel, Discovery Channel, Travel Channel. Yeah, I'm in there.
I'm in that of Ancient Aliens. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, that Absinthe was brought to us by the aliens, and basically, humans just adopted it. So, yeah.
Aliens. They invent everything. So where is the best place for folks to find out more about jade?
Wow. Well, of course, jadeliqueurs.com. And there's avenues to ask me questions directly. Of course, there's the Wormwood Society, which is a nice group on Facebook. There's some other Facebook groups on Absinthe for people that are into that are on Facebook, and so that would be another worthwhile resource. And then there's some pretty good videos on YouTube about Absinthe as well. I'm in quite a few of them, and and my words around. You can't research Absinthe on the web and not find me right away. I've been doing this a long time, and yeah, I'm visible, so I come up right away. And hey, but it wasn't my chosen career path; it kind of chose me. So I've just ridden it to this point.
Where are you going to be next? Are you going to be at Bar Convent Brooklyn or somewhere else? I mean, obviously, Tales. Everyone has to wait till the 11th hour to find out if you'll be at Tales.
Yeah, I just came out of BCV London, which was a fine show. So, my work with Absinthe is not just in the U.S. I mean, I was in London for a good while. I do a lot of Absinthe education in that market. I've done a couple of Absinthe master classes at the National Gallery in London, which is great because there's nothing like drinking Absinthe with critics of Impressionist art. So, it's something that, and in Europe too. I mean, I've done some shows in Europe, and we'll do more on the radar immediately. I'm trying to stay flexible for the next couple months, but my travel schedule is going to heat up again in August, September. So, it's just part of what I do. I just roll with it.
Well, I'm going to connect you to Dave Schmier about
do that.
I think that'd be very cool. Usually there's a side room for seminars and stuff, and I'd attend. I'd love to hear more about this. I love the history of spirits because history of spirits is so intertwined with the history of just everything else, politics and just culture. It's really amazing. I've done this with Irish whiskey and just how the history of Ireland and Irish whiskey are so meshed together. So I'd love to find out more and hear more. And I'm sad that we only have a limited amount of time on this to go over it. But,
I'd love to do it. I'm always game to get back to Chicagoland for any reason, large or small. So yeah, I'd love to do something like that. That would be great. Be good fun. It's all, and that's one thing. It's always good fun. The day I stop having fun with this, I'll quit. But
Yep.
it's been fun. Yeah, it has been.
But Ted, thanks very much. This has been great. We should have you back on at some point.
I'll do that. And you'll be glad to know that one of my favorite classic absinthe cocktails, absinthe frappe, what my favorite variation of that cocktail is basically an ounce of absinthe, a quarter ounce of Benedictine liqueur. You may have heard of it. All put into a shaker full of crushed ice. Shake the crap out of it until it's frosted. You can't hold it anymore. Strain it into Nick and Nora with a squeeze of orange. It's beautiful.
Boom. That's going to be my next cocktail.
Try it.
Confession. I had 18 glorious months as the national brand ambassador for Benedictine. And after that, I was a little cocktailed out and I had to go right back to whiskey, spirits. It was like, I thought I developed diabetes after a while. Way too much sugar in a lot of those cocktails. But that's also another reason why I just like having spirits by themselves.
Yeah, agreed. Well, as a distiller, I like having spirits by themselves because that tells me what I want to know. So, yeah. And I'm all about shop talk when it comes to spirits. So.
All right, everyone. Make sure you check out Ted's website, jadeliquors.com. Be there. Look for him maybe at Tales of the Cocktail. All right.
Yeah, maybe so. You never know.
Keep just I don't know. For the last minute, just kind of look around and go, oh my God, there he is. So there you go. All right. Well, thanks, Ted, and everybody. Be good. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Marty.
We'll talk at you soon. All right.
Thanks for spending time with us on I Drink, Therefore I Am. You can watch every episode of the podcast inside Hospitality Nexus, a global human-first platform bringing the hospitality ecosystem together in one place. Inside the Nexus, it's a career fair that never closes, connecting industry leaders, educators, students, employers, and partners through real presence. Create your free account and explore the community at www.hospitalitynexus.org. And until next time, sip thoughtfully, drink responsibly, sláinte.